Hi everyone, welcome back to this episode of the 5710 podcast, this time with Jamie Fobert from Jamie Fobert Architects. Since its inception in 1996, they have established a reputation for innovative and inspiring architectural design. Over 2 decades, the practice has grown to be an outstanding team of 18 based in Shoreditch, London. Their diverse portfolio of work has been acknowledged with numerous awards and accolades, and most recently their project in the St. Ives was shortlisted for the Reba Sterling Prize last year. Jamie studied architecture in his native Canada at the University of Toronto. He then arrived in London in 1988 and worked for 8 years at David Chipperfield Architects. As director of Jamie Fobert Architects, Jamie invests personally and contributes his design expertise into every project. He also lectures and teaches widely and has a deep involvement in the arts, including being a trustee of the Camden Art Centre. Welcome to Aberdeen and to RGU.
Thank you.
Did you have a good trip up today?
Yes.
Is this the first time you've been in Aberdeen?
No, I actually lectured for 5710.
Oh, okay.
So I lectured for 5710, must be about 8 years ago,
Oh, right,
when
okay.
you were before this building.
Yeah, it was before.
Yeah.
Before this building.
Yep.
And did you just go to the Maggie Centre in Aberdeen?
Yes, because we've just recently started work on a Maggie Centre in Coventry.
Oh, nice. Oh, cool.
We're just in the very early stages, so I've been on a tour to see lots of Maggies.
Oh, great.
And so I thought it was a good idea while I'm in Aberdeen to see the
that.
Soweto one, which was quite amazing.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It's good. That was one of the first things that we did in first year, was go see that Maggie Centre, so it's good that other people kind of...
Yeah.
So in your practice, you work on a wide range of projects, from galleries, residential, and as you just said, something like a Maggie Centre. Does your design approach differ when tackling them, or is it quite similar?
No, it does differ. I think there's an underlying set of interests in sculptural form, in qualities of light, in materiality, in an architecture that's much more interested in internal space than in making external forms.
Yeah.
But when you're doing a retail space in Selfridges and you know it's going to be there for 6 years or 5, and it's about someone experiencing something for half an hour or an hour, you can be much more playful, much more experimental, because it's not a contemplative space, shopping. When you're doing someone's house, of course you have to be it's a very different experience.
Much more personal.
It's much more personal, it's quieter, somewhere where someone has to wake up in the morning and also, be there for when the house is full, when the house is empty, when they're ill. So you have to make architecture that's very quiet, very soothing, very homely. And then again, when you're making art spaces, it's incredibly important that the art takes precedence.
Yeah, exactly.
That you're creating this place where both the art and the viewer are comfortable, and where curators are free to do what they like. Yeah. So the amount of architecture seems very small.
But that in itself is a skill, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Well put.
So similar to that, your projects are quite worldwide. You've got some in the Caribbean and Spain and that as well. Does this add an extra layer of challenge because you are based in London when designing for a place that is maybe difficult to access, but you may have never been there before as well?
Yes, but there's always value in building far away. Yeah. You learn that certain norms that you get used to working in, say, the UK aren't the norm somewhere else. Yeah. And then you begin to question what are the norms, the things that you're just used to. So it kind of frees you up. Of course, it's always a struggle building in far-off places in terms of not being on site very often, not knowing the craftsmen, not knowing the products, being able to try and put a project together. But we've really enjoyed it. We built a house in Trinidad and Tobago. We've worked in the US. We've worked in France. We built a house in Spain. Yeah. It's been always a pleasure to do those projects. We're just about to start work on a very large house in the center of Portugal, and we're working in a house in Dublin. Oh. So and even between London and Dublin, there's quite a shift in the planning system, what matters, the rules. Regulations are an incredibly interesting thing. They seem fixed, building regs, and yet everywhere you go in the world, building regs change.
Yeah, even between Scotland and England, there's differences. So have you managed to visit all of the places that you've designed for as well?
Oh, always.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't design anywhere that I haven't been to site.
Yeah, okay.
For a start, because you can't design a building if you haven't not just been to site, but been to site early in the morning, been to site, at night, been to site on the weekend, been to site on a quiet day. You need to see, and ideally different seasons, but that doesn't really happen very often. But no, and we generally only do work where we're the architects through the whole project. So we don't just do a design and hand it over to some local architect and let them build it, because you're not going to get the result that you want. Yeah, so we don't do that.
So you yourself are a native of Canada.
Yes.
What was the transition from life in Canada to life in London? Did you move straight to London?
I did. I had no intention of staying in London. I finished university in '88. I had an English grandmother, which gave me the right to return. Yeah. And I thought it would be really fun for a year to come to London. If I couldn't get a job in an architect's office, I'd get a job in a pub. And then I could go, I had studied for a term in Rome with the University of Toronto and traveled around Europe. And that was an amazing experience. And living in Rome for those 4 months and studying there was great.
Yeah.
And I thought, when I finished university, it was the moment when I can do this. I had my degree, but I wasn't an architect in Ontario or in Britain. And your skill set at that point, model making, rendering, drawing, are the same in Canada as they are in the UK. But I just arrived and very fortunately got a job with David Shipfield when the office was 5 people.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it was very, very
small,
beginning. And very quickly, we started working on really wonderful projects. And the recession hit, the one previous to the last one, the one before you were born. And it was really bad in Canada, and there just wasn't work. And I was sitting in London working with David Shipfield on a house for a wonderful fashion photographer called Nick Knight, and starting to work on, I flew out to Japan to work on a shop. The first summer I was in London, there was no need to go back to Canada. And gradually I just grew to love London and the work I was doing, and there was just no need to. And I've just become a Londoner.
That's great.
Yeah.
So speaking about the Tate St. Ives, my family's actually from St. Ives, so this is kind of a personal question.
All right.
What was it like working in St. Ives? Because it's quite especially on something as important as the Tate, which is integral to the community. And did you like the area? Yeah,
well, it's unbelievably beautiful. And I think the fact that it's a 6.5 hour, like when the train, train journey, it says 5.5, but but when it means that it's so far from London that when you get there, it feels even more special.
Yeah.
And so there is something incredible about the very Penwith, the end of Cornwall. It's just so magical. And the whole group of artists who went to St. Ives and produced this incredible body of work, right from Ben Nicholson through to Patrick Heron and even living artists who are there now, has a really special place in the history of British art. And the fabric of the town is amazing. It's so it's like architecture before architects. The old town,
exactly.
Not the Victorian terraces on the hill.
No, like the fishing.
Yeah, the old fishing village. This sort of completely eclectic and idiosyncratic set of buildings that twist and turn are really beautiful. Yeah. So I loved going down there. I really, actually, now that it's been finished for a year and a half, I really miss that train journey.
Yeah. I went in summer one of the reasons was to see the Tate, and it was a great experience to go. And as soon as we left, we wanted to be back in St. Ives and wandering around the streets. So when you're hiring people out of university, whether part 1 or part 2, what do you kind of look for in their in their personality, but their portfolio as well?
That's an interesting point. You know pretty quickly when you interview someone. It's for me, it's a combination of things. One is whether they're really serious about being an architect, and that manifests itself in knowledge and enthusiasm. Yeah. And whether they've transferred that interest and desire to be an architect in honing really good skills. And so, of course, a recent graduate, we need them to be able to draw well, produce images, produce models. But at the same time, you're looking for someone who will take a task, no matter how small, really seriously, and produce it efficiently and carefully, and have a good temperament and be a bit of a good laugh at the same time. The office is a really happy place. It is. And there are lots of architecture offices that aren't.
Yeah.
And there are lots of architecture offices that thrive on being aggressive and have a reign of fear.
Yeah.
And our office is nothing like that at all. And that's one of the aspects of my life I really take pride in, is the social, family-like quality that the office has.
And we're kind of coming to the end of the podcast, but there's a few more questions.
Okay.
How do you see the architectural profession in the UK, but also in the world as a whole, changing in the future?
I almost view myself as one of the last of the old-fashioned architects that has this name on the practice and does work. I think what's really exciting about young architects is the way they collaborate, the way they form collaborations and then break them up and form new collaborations, the way they can work with artists, graphic designers, city planners. The idea that architects can be much more fluid, I think, is really exciting. I mean, even in the practice, we're trying to do more collaborative work, whereas traditionally that just never happened.
Okay. So what might be ask about the future, now the past. What's your favourite memory from your architectural career, or maybe like a favourite story that you tell, either from in your time in uni or in your career in London?
Well, I haven't prepared for this at all, but it's about knowledge. And when I came for my interview with David Chipperfield, I just arrived in London. I had a portfolio of work, and he was going through my portfolio, and he said, and he thought one project reminded him of the work of Caesar. And I had no idea who Alvaro Caesar was, and I thought he meant Caesar Pelli, and I was slightly offended. So this is where knowledge comes in handy.
So finally, we ask this of everyone, if a student might go on an architectural grand tour. So what one building in one city would you recommend that they'd make a stop on their tour?
Anywhere in the world?
Yeah, anywhere in the world. It would be an expensive tour.
An expensive tour. Well, recently I went to Sao Paulo, and I'd always known about the work of Niemeyer and the kind of textbook Brazilian architects.
Yeah.
But what I discovered were these architects I'd never heard of. One's called Villanova, and he built the architecture school in Sao Paulo, which is out of town, and is a huge hovering concrete block that's completely open air, and it's amazing.
And the city would be Sao Paulo as well? Or?
I think while we're there, yes, why not?
Okay.
Sao Paulo is a great city.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining us. When do you go back to London?
Tomorrow.
Okay, so not too much time, but hopefully
I'm going to Paris on Friday. So
okay, well, enjoy Paris.
Yeah, big of a contrast, Aberdeen to Paris.
I don't know who wins that competition. Thank you very much for joining us. And thank you everyone for listening. Next week we have another special guest from London, is Peter St. John from Caruso St. John, so be sure to tune in then as well. Thank you.